Hi, I'm Marcel, and welcome to me screaming into the void, mostly about books. And I understand you want to read more critically and reflect more about your reading. I have been watching a trend on book social media in this year of a lot of people wanting to read more critically and more in depth and reflect more about their reading. At the same time, we have also seen a bit more interactions of a negative sorts, arguments, fights, what have you, about the fact that people are at different reading levels and different levels of reading comprehension. Now, the fact that people have different reading comprehensions is something that has been talked about directly, indirectly, since at least 2020, when we had a mass involvement of people who have gone back to reading and not necessarily having read anything since school, and finally, due to things that won't be mentioned, found the hobby interesting again, and this is great. At the same time, we have sort of lost the ball, lost the comprehension of the fact that literary comprehension and reading is a skill. And I can somehow understand the fact that talking so explicitly about reading being a skill is difficult for some people. One of sort of the counter arguments, especially recently, where I think a lot of people who are sort of a part of the 2020 wave of readers have started to talk about wanting to read more comprehensively, has been a bit of a skerfuffle, in lack of a better word, because the fact that this is a skill and we accept the fact that we talk about skill level when it comes to playing basketball or learning the guitar, but talking about reading comprehension and reading as a skill, people very often assume that you're saying, oh, I'm stupid, as if reading comprehension and reading skill has anything to do with their intelligence. It's not. It's practice. And that, I think, is what we are seeing now, with especially, again, the wave of new readers that we had from the 2020. People are leveling up their reading. Yay! People are becoming better readers. People are leveling up in their reading comprehension. And that, of course, means that the room in which we in social media and the different levels that we have to accept people are in regard to their reading and reading comprehension, it has become much more, not wider necessarily in the sense that it's in the form of line of where people are in regard to skill level, but has become much more diverse. So rather than having two camps, we are now having a lot of different people who are in a lot of different ways in their reading comprehension. This is good. It is good that people are at different levels in their reading comprehension, because that means that people are getting better at reading. And of course, when we're talking about that, we also need to talk about the Dunning-Kruger effect. The Dunning-Kruger effect, as a teacher, is something I both love and hate, because the Dunning-Kruger effect means that when you are at a lower level at anything, you don't really understand that you are at a lower level. And again, this has nothing to do with intelligence or talent. It's everything to do with training. How much have you been doing it? And the fact is that if you know that you are bad at something, you very often will not want to do it. So nature has given us this wonderful gift of the Dunning-Kruger effect, which means that when we are bad at something, we don't know that we're bad at something, so we continue to do it. And therefore we practice. And with practice, we become better. And then we get an existential crisis when we understand how bad we are at something that we have sort of done with so much gusto and invested so much time and energy in. But again, that is a sign of becoming better. And you are then becoming better. If you feel you're becoming worse, very often it's a sign that you are getting better at something. And the problem, of course, with this has to do with the fact that when we are at different parts of our reading journey, when people are leveling up at different parts of their reading journey, people are also at different parts in regard to the Dunning-Kruger effect. And if we point out too harshly to people that what they are doing is bad, they will either reject it because they don't acknowledge it because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, or they will realize, oh, this book that I love because it is perfectly in line with where I am in regard to my reading journey. So I clearly have to be bad at reading, and because of course, the cultural weirdness of not acknowledging that reading is a skill. It's not talent. It's not something that you're born with. It has nothing to do with your intelligence. It's everything to do with practice. But if you sort of are pointed out that what you are doing is something you are bad at, people will give up. At the same time, people who are further away and have sort of leveled up in their reading kind of come to a place where they realize that books they loved beforehand are objectively bad. They're not well written from a craftsmanship, which, again, just another side note, has nothing to do with your subjective emotional engagement with a book. And has sort of the need to point out that, well, this is a badly written book because that's where they are in their journey. And if there's something that we people are bad at doing, especially on social media, is to give each other grace. And it is to accept the fact that we are in a space that has to, if we want it to continue to existing, has to have space for different people on different spots and places on their journey. And refusing to acknowledge the fact that someone might be better than you in something, and refusing to accept that someone might actually be not as well read as you are, and therefore might not see the same things that you do, and might feel bad if you point it out, are both lacking grace for the diversity in this space. And I did not mean that to rhyme, but there you go. Grace for the people in the space. So, what I want to do with this is for the people that have now started to talking about wanting to read more critically, wanting to reflect more about their reading, that has leveled up. I have, as someone who has been reading for probably too much of their lives, wants to give some tips and tricks for this new space that you are occupying in your journey. And if you are not ready to be there, that's not where you are in your journey, you are not stupid. You are not worthless. It's okay. And when you are ready, I will welcome you back and you can see the rest of the video. For the rest of you, the people who want to read more critically and want to reflect more about your reading, the one thing you need to accept or come to grips with in regarding that is that if you want to reflect on your reading, you need to reflect with something. And that with something is, among other things, literary theory. You don't have to use literary theory, but literary theory is very often the easiest thing to reflect on when it comes to your reading. And the positive and probably the negative thing about that is that most of you will have experience with reflecting in regard to literary theory, because most educational systems will have some kind of literary analysis as part of their core curriculum. And this is great because that means that you already have some tools in your toolbox when starting to read more in depth in your reading. The sad part is that some of you might have been scarred with how that was taught in your educational system, because the educational system, sadly, is based on grades, and grades are very bad when it comes to learning. But that is a completely different story and a completely different video. But you're not starting from scratch. And the good thing about reading analytically now, reflecting about books and your reading and reading more in depth now is that no one cares about what you are asking questions about and what answers you are answering them with. You are doing this for you. There are no grades. There are no teachers telling you you're doing it wrong. There might be some idiots that's saying you're doing it wrong, but don't listen to those idiots. Any question that you ask your reading, any answer you are answering those questions with, is valid and is right because they are coming from you and what you are interested in. And that is what is important. When you are reading more critically, when you are reflecting on your literary journey, it's because you are going to learn something about yourself and what you are interested in regarding to the texts that you are meeting, the books that you are meeting. And for someone, that will also mean engaging in conversations with others. And there might be a time when you understand that the questions you are asking and the answers you are giving for those questions might be different than other people. That doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. But that doesn't also mean that the other person is doing it wrong, because you are going at it from different worldviews, because you are two different people. Now, when you are ready, you might want to engage with people who have asked different questions than you and come to different answers than you. You might end up discussing and debating one another, and maybe some of the questions you are asking will be different and the answers will be different based on those conversations. But you don't need to engage with other people in regarding that until you are ready. Because there is no right or wrong way to do this. And that is what is so wonderful with analyzing your own reading. Because what are you interested in? Maybe you are interested in the text itself. So, for example, this is a graphic novel, Chaos in Kinshasa, by Barley Baruti and Thierry Belfroid. And this is about, Barley Baruti is from the DRC. And this is set in DRC and set during a fight, a boxing fight between George Foreman and Muhammad Ali, which was a real boxing fight that they had, the Rumble in the Jungle. And the whole of this is that you have an African-American man who is traveling to DRC and is mixed up with a lot of the politics of the time in DRC. But the book is in part based that an African-American man is traveling to an African country to watch two African-American men fight one another. And one of the questions that you might then be interested in is, well, why is this set in DRC in the first place? How would this book be different if it, for example, had been set in the US? Or maybe you are interested in, well, women. Statistically, you are a woman, because statistically, most of book social media are women. And you could read a book like Persuasion and ask questions in regard to women's position. The fact that Anne Elliot is in the situation she is in is because as a woman she is not allowed to earn her own money. So she is completely dependent on her family. Or what I think is more interesting is to ask the questions of, Anne Elliot has one really good female friend in this book. And she has one, I think it's her godmother. And the godmother is the one that she is looking mostly to in this book. And you can always ask them the question, is Anne Elliot guided by the right person? Why is her godmother giving her the advice that she is giving her in this book? And would it have been different? Because the book, for those who have no idea about Persuasion by Jane Austen, is about Anne Elliot, who is upper class, who falls in love with the sailor at a young age, rejects him because her godmother recommends her to reject him. And then when she is older and practically unmarriageable, she gets in contact with the sailor again, who's now a captain. And the book starts from the point of view of her then reflecting on, why did I choose the things that I chose? So, for example, why does she listen to her godmother? And if her friend had been present at this time, would her friend have given her different advice? And would Anne have been had Anne had an easier life if she had listened to her friends? Or maybe you are interested more in the different meetings in regard to skin color, and of course ethnicity and culture. Only God Can Make a Tree by Bertrand Roach. Bertrand Roach is an author from St. Kitts and Nevis, and he talks about here a man who is mixed. And because he is mixed, he is light-skinned. And because he is light-skinned, he is given advantages in life. And among other things, he also pursues a white woman. Not because he is in love with this white woman, but because he knows that this white woman would continue to give him these advantages. So Bertrand Roche in this book tries to point to a discussion of how skin color is a part of any discussion, also in sort of countries and cultures that isn't predominantly white, even if St. Kitts and Nevis do have a colonial past. Or maybe you are interested in questions when it comes to, well, morals, right and wrong. One of the things that I think is so fascinating about this book, Sin is a Puppy That Follows You Home, by Balaraba Ramayt Yakubu. I'm sorry for that pronunciation. This is a Hausa romance. So it is two parallel stories. It's about a mother who is separating from her husband because her husband isn't a nice guy, and it's about her daughter who has attracted one of the richest, most famous men in their culture. And the story between the daughter and this man is very much a traditional romance. But what I found very interesting, because it was very foreign from what I grew up with a Christian culture, and this is set in a Muslim culture. And so the whole story regarding how the relationship between the mother and the father that had done something bad to the mother, how was the mother supposed to react to that? And how was the culture supposed to fix the wrong that the father had done? And there are some points that this book sort of asks you to consider that I would never have thought of. And while I not necessarily agree with it, think it is interesting questions that this book sort of poses, or the questions that I am gravitated to when reading that book. I don't have a physical copy of this next book with me, but another very, very common thing to look at is, of course, class. This is one of the most common literary theories there are. And I have created a video based on one of my absolutely favorite books, which is North and South by Elizabeth Gaskell, which is about where I look at how the focus of class was changing, because you have one character that represents the old way of looking at class as something you are born into, and the other person is looking at class from a mobility standpoint, which was the new way of understanding class. And I'm not really talking about if you are going to ask questions in regard to class. You need to be able to analyze that these are two different ways of looking at class. But it's more about asking questions how class can play a role in this. What part of class plays a role in it? One of the people in this book has, for example, a lot of money, but is uneducated, doesn't really know much about culture, and chooses to go to school because he wants to be cultured. It's not enough to have money. So there are a lot of different pointers in regard to class that is interesting questions to ask in a book like North and South. Then, of course, we can have, if you want to look into more sort of niche things, because any question you ask yourself is questions based, is a form of analytical work. So Benji by Kathy Esquel, she is a Belize author. Benji is a book that talks about mental health. So Benji is, we find out halfway through the book that his mental illness is schizophrenia. If you identify that that is schizophrenia, depends on your knowledge of schizophrenia. I didn't know, but I assumed that it was schizophrenia quite early based on some of the symptoms, because Benji talks about, and the people around him talk about, for example, hallucinations that Benji has quite early. And the book is about Benji, who is, of course, someone with schizophrenia in the 1990s. He is medicated, but to not the same level as we have today. And he is witness to a murder, which asks brilliant questions, or makes us ask brilliant questions in regard to, well, who do we trust? And why do we trust the people that we trust? If someone who has hallucinations tells you that they have seen a murder, what would make you believe them? Or is Benji right when he says that because of his illness, well, no one would believe him? So you see here that if you want to, if you're in a place where you feel like, I want to read more critically, I want to read more in depth, I want to reflect more about my reading, what you do first and foremost is ask questions and then figure out your answers to those questions. And the questions you ask and how you end up answering them can tell you something about yourself. So, what are the questions and answers that you are asking yourself right now? And thank you for listening to me screaming into the void.